Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Bald Explorer reading with me, Richard Vobes, on the 10th. Is it the 10th? It is the 10th of November 2020, and it's very nice to be here with you today on what was and still is down here in Worthing a relatively pleasant and mild afternoon, and a mild, pleasant morning as well, with a bit of sunshine, a bit of cloud, and I've been out filming, I've been editing. And I'd just like to say to those of you who've emailed me, thank you very much. I'm a bit behind on answering the emails, and I will get round to them. It's just that the editing and the filmmaking and then the lives all take precedence, so it's not always possible. And, of course, warming one's hands with a nice cup of coffee. Actually, it's quite hot, so excuse me as I have a slurp. We are continuing with our reading of Lift Luck on Southern Roads, a most joyous book, and we will commence in a moment. But first, a hello to Turbo Stream and Billabong O'Neill, to Audrey Forbes Hamilton, to John F., to Justine Jones, to the lovely Julia, Philip Hammond and Mary, to Lee Lawson, to Days of Yours, to Ed Loud, to Steve G, and anybody else, 29 of you who have already turned up. Started grey, says Turbo Stream, but ended up quite nice in the Shire. I'm very pleased to hear that, up there in the Midlands. So we are going to be concentrating not so much in the Midlands, but down on the southern roads, and I think we're in Wiltshire, if I remember rightly, close to Stonehenge, and we are in a railway carriage, which reminds me, I asked the lovely Linda Kane, who have yet to see arrive, if she would send in a photograph from her first edition of the book that she has, and she very kindly did. So let's just have a look at the picture of the... where is the thing? Here we go. This, he must have taken this picture with the photograph, with the camera rather, that he took with him. Lodging for the night, it says there, and there it is. It does look a truly dilapidated old railway carriage from 1910. So make of that what you will, ladies and gentlemen. Certainly not one of the 1960s slam door jobs, although I dare say they had some form of slamming door, which was nice. Other pictures that she sent here, I can't read the quotation on that, but that's somebody clearly that he met on his way and took a photograph. I don't know whether we've passed that bit or not, but certainly a characterful face. There is, it says, an old English homestead, but that actually is the Bignor cottage that is famous in lots of guidebooks, which apparently is £1,000 to stay for a week, I think, on Airbnb, or is it a night? I can't remember now, for a weekend. That apparently you can stay there now as an Airbnb. Gracious. There are more pictures, but they're more generic, apparently. So they're the three that Linda has sent in. So that was very kind. Thank you very much, Linda. So there we are. There are 16 in the book, maybe a couple more as you progress. So there we are. Anyway, fantastic. I'm just looking to see if she's there. She's not there yet. So we will continue anyway. So presumably he's going to wake up on chapter 13 in the railway carriage. Hello to Mark Donny McLeod and to Mike Stevens, who's also joined us. And yay, says the lovely Julia, did you hear that? Justine. Yes, I managed to get it right. I think I prefer the look of the old shop at Bignor in its dilapidated state. Yes, I know, isn't it? It's quite romantic to think that these old, whatever age it is, 15th century, 16th century timber frame building, that, you know, for a long, long time they would have been in a state of decay, I suppose, and not necessarily looked like to the nth degree that we do at the moment. And hello to Laura Noel C. Nice to see you. So here we go. We're going to start with chapter 13. When I woke next morning, the sun was streaming over my head through the cobweb-wreathed windows of the old railway carriage, taking in its path a host of other cobwebs that hung from the roof and changed them to fleeces of gold. Hello, Andrew Norris. Nice to see you pop in. I lay for some time wondering at this unusual bed drapery, not recollecting for the moment where I was, but gradually the events of overnight returned. I kicked off my rustling counterpane, unbarred the door, and stepped out into the keen freshness of the morning. It was a typical autumn morning, sunny, still, and bitter cold. Overhead, larks were cajoling in the blue sky. Upon the grass there was a thick accretion of dew that glittered with 1,000 iridescent colours. A pillar of smoke rose out of a distant fold in the hills, and the voice of the threshing mill droned on the calm air. But there was no other sound, nor sign of human life in all the great expanse around me. I looked about for Stonehenge. I had a sudden notion of returning thither for a sunlight impression of it, but it was nowhere in sight, and an absolutely raving hunger got the better of the idea. I hastily collected my belongings, stuck my hurdle stake upright in the hay, with a shilling in the knife cut at the top of it to pay my unknown host for the night's lodging, then set out over the dew-whitened plain in search of Amesbury and breakfast. You imagine the owner at some point returning to the old carriage there and finding an upright stake with a shilling in the cut. Marvellous. I wonder what he would have made of that. Someone's been there in my hay barn. What are they doing in there? Oh, there's a shilling. That's all right then. I went eastward, right in the face of the sun, judging that this was its most probable direction. Soon I struck a path, then a road, and finally came down through a forest of flaming elm and beech into Avon Valley. Long, however, before the shimmering breadth of the river came into view amidst trees, I had heard and yielded to its quiet melody. Amesbury dwells in the song of Avon. Nowhere in the little torpid derelict town can you escape its influence. Life goes on there to an eternal accompaniment of still music. Every humdrum, etc. of daily existence is changed by it into a stanza of the world symphony. When presently I stood by an open upper window of the inn, toweling myself and looking forth at the new faces of the passers-by and the pretty quaint fronts of the houses, I found myself dropping into a continual reverie, carried irresistibly along by Avon's purring flow. It was the same as I sat below at breakfast, the same as I strolled about on moss-grown ways of the place, trying to concern myself with medieval architecture. Finally, I gave way to it altogether, and going down to the old stone bridge just clear of the village, lolled about there all the dreamy morning through. I wonder what you do when you loll about. Just sort of smoked his pipe, presumably. What have we got in the comments? What ho Vobesters? Hello to you, Andrew. Yes, I use two devices, watch on the telly and type on my phone. Very clever. Sorry, just enjoying my coffee. To my side, as I leaned over the parapet, watching the waters flow, and the play of the sunlight on its submerged green bed, came an old gentleman, clad in decent broadcloth and walking by the aid of 2 sticks. For some time back I'd heard this steady stump drawing nearer and nearer on the gravel walk, but I had not looked round. I was in chase of an idea, as elusive as the sun and shadow play at the bottom of the stream, and was interested for the moment in no other human but myself. The old gentleman came and leaned over the balustrade at my side with that quiet, assured familiarity to strangers which is seen only in men who have kept their mental vigour into old age. One must be 80, it would seem, before one could grasp to the full the theory of the familyhood of the race. Until then, we prate of a universal father and a divine big brother, but we pass our neighbour unacknowledged in the street. The old gentleman spoke. I was startled from my reverie, not because he had done so, but because of the surprising fact that his words dealt with the very thought paramount in my own disjointed reflections. "You talk of a river," said he. Now I know that they're in Wiltshire, and I don't know the Wiltshire accent, so you're getting a little bit of this accent as a matter of course, to differentiate the author talking and anybody else. Until we get into, even in Sussex, of course, there would have been a Sussex accent back then that has now been washed away by combination of people moving down from London and received speech, I imagine. Anyway, to continue. "You talk of a river," said he, "but what is a river? And where is it? Every moment the water changes. This minute you're looking at something which was not there a minute ago, and the next minute it shall be a new thing again. Its bed and its banks and the green things on 'em seem to persist from day to day, but it's only an appearance. Come back here in the autumn of another year, and there shall not be a grain of earth or a grass blade of all you see before you now. Yet the river, you say, is still there. There has been a river here for thousands of years. Well, what do you mean by the word?" I looked at him with growing curiosity. He was a placid, clean-shaven old man, wonderfully refined in feature, whose eyes bespoke of a long acquaintance with bodily pain. He returned my look with a steady cheerfulness. "How did you know I was thinking of that?" I broke out involuntarily. He laughed, a slow, quiet laugh. "I might make another guess," he said. "Somehow or other, you were linking up your river thoughts with thoughts that come from much nearer home. You may have been thinking that if your own life were such as the river's, always youthful, brimming, strong, yet whose reality and persistence are seemingly no more than a shadow of a shadow, whether, if the choice were given you, you would be willing to buy eternal youth at such a price in hope and ideals, whether, if the river is a true reflection of human life, it is worth the trouble of learning to grow old at all. For we all have to face that inevitable consequence of living." I took time to answer him. He had greatly overestimated the profundity of my reflections, but I saw no reason to enlightening him on that point. In the end, the best answer seemed to lie in a counter-question, so I said, "Sir, were these your thoughts when you were my age? Or are they thoughts that come only when a man is old, and therefore too late to bring him either loss or profit? It is true that I have reached a time of life when all original institutions and impulses have lost their cutting edge, and reason must perforce take the entire guidance of things if they are to progress at all. But that is just the difficulty, and that is just where, by your leave, old men seem to fail in an obvious duty to younger ones. If, as you say, the art of growing old is a thing that can be learned, why are old men so universally silent on the matter? To be quite frank with you, at the moment you came up, I had realised, and for the first time in my life, that I had now got to face the thing. But I can see neither help nor comfort in this river philosophy. He waved his hand towards a little house blinking afar off in the trees. I can only answer for myself, he said. For my part, it is a duty I have long recognised and tried to fulfil. Do you see that window there? Well, I sit at it on sunny mornings, and whenever I see one, like yourself, standing on this bridge, I come out and talk to him. Now, hear the truth of the whole matter. Did not you see that if the river is no more did not you see that if the river is no more than appearances make it, there can be no river at all? There must be something else, something changeless and immortal, to which the moving water, the grass, the flowers are only a symbolic clothing. Well, that something else is the mind of God. It is the same with your own life. What you take to be the passing away of much of its colour and joy and brightness is not passing, but substitution. It is not sunset, but dawn. Look at this bare look at this bare branch. A month ago it was heavy with green leaves. Yesterday with sere and yellow ones. Now it has shed them all, and in the place of each is a full, sappy bud, potentially another assured summer. The bareness only exists in the eye that seeks for it. So what you got to learn is really not how to grow old, but that there is no growing old at all. That's quite profound, isn't it? I wonder how many people think like that. The halting chime music of the church tower now broke upon the old gentleman's meditations. To this, and the quieter, gentle melody of the water, he stumped his way back towards his cottage, and I saw him no more. I returned to the inn and its cosy parlour and ordered lunch. There are many inns in Elmsbury, inns to suit all temperaments and momentary moods. I chose out of this one originally because of the brightness of its windows, the sleek condition of its cat, and its well-worn doorstep, the only infallible guides to good cheer and comfort, so far as I know. These being satisfactory, I was not surprised to find the landlord, his wife, and his two pretty daughters of the same sterling quality. The whole family busied themselves in my entertainment, coming and going in turns between the bar and the parlour, either with contestables or local information, for both of which I had inquired. I soon noticed, however, that their solitude was about equally divided between myself and another. This other was a canary in a cage that just hung over my head. I'd been inwardly rejoicing at its silence, but now discovered this to be a matter of great anxiety for the family. They brought it sugar, fresh seed, warm water. Each in turn came and looked at it, addressed it in endearing terms, or stirred it gently with a finger. But nothing seemed to hearten the wretched fowl. It crouched at the bottom of the cage with its head lolling against the bars and its feathers twisted all ways, and was regardless of every effort for its improvement. Finally, the whole family came and stood round the cage together. "What's gone wrong with Peepy? I can't think," said the landlady dolefully. "I tell you what, mother," said the landlord, struck with a sudden bright idea. "I were reading last night in the paper of yours how a drop of sherry wine be famous for sick linnets. Now, like as not a canary. Oh, but I give him some only this morning. It ain't done him any good." "You did, mother?" interrupted the eldest girl quickly. "Oh, why, I given him some too." The second girl looked at the three in consternation. "Sykes, mother," she said, "drat these papers! I've given him half a heart cake, soaked with cherry, just before dinner." The landlord turned to me with a slow, mirthful wink. "Ah, well, like as not he'll be singing for a soda before tea time. There's many in this parish who'll be glad of that complaint." The afternoon, they got the what is it, canary? They got the canary drunk. "What's the matter with it? I don't know. I've heard. You give it some little bit of wine, it'll be all right." "Oh, well, it's funny you should say that, because I did that this afternoon." "Did you?" "Oh, bugger, I did that too." "No, you didn't do that, did you?" "Well, I just done that as well." "Oh, no, bloody thing's pest." The afternoon had fallen grey when I left Amesbury. I took the Andover road because a friendly carrier was going that way, but a couple of miles was all I could put up with on that appalling thoroughfare. Amesbury lies in one of the rich pockets of soil that are a characteristic feature of the Wiltshire Downs. No sooner had the carrier's little cart jogged its way out of the village when the country took on a flat, treeless, woe-begone air. It shoaled up dismally before me, forever it seemed, with the straight road in their midst of it, like a crack in a plate. The telegraph wires dirged overhead. Dejected plough teams crept about like beetles here and there in the dun brown fields. A few solitary flint pickers bent to their cheerless task, and hoeing there had the look of being the last resource of destitute. Let me just read that again. It's interesting, actually. The plough team, yeah, a few solitary flint pickers. It's interesting that the people are out in the fields just picking the flints. I suppose to make the fields look to be more beneficial. A few solitary flint pickers bent to their cheerless task, and hoeing there had the look of being the last resource of the destitute, instead of the fine discriminative work it is in kindlier hands. 3 motors had scrooped by in quick succession, and a fourth was churning up 100 weight of highway metal in a drab distance. It was a straw too many. "Hold," I said to the carrier. "To Porton, 4 miles. Here's my turning. I'm rather in a hurry. I'm due at a funeral there at 3 o'clock. I fled down the narrow lane, not stopped until I had left the motorist dust and all that bewailing aerial ironmongery behind me. Here the landscape soon acquired a pleasanter tinge. I found myself in open downland again, and descrying a black figure striding towards me over the gorse-clad slope to my left, I waited to see what manner of man it was, feeling, under that grey sky, not adverse to company. It was a policeman, going about his village round, and as we tramped on together, he told me a story illustrative of the lonely character of all that countryside. "You see that clump hang on. Hello. I've got to get into policeman mode. "Do you see that clump of whin yonder?" he said, pointing to a dark patch on a hillside, perhaps a mile away. "Well, I was once kept prisoner there with my own staff held over my head to keep me quiet like, whiles a bit of devilry was brewing. If you looks about in the bushes, you'll see 2 skeletons, and I'll tell you how they came to be there. 'Twas just such another day as this, when I was coming along this very identical bit of road when I could sight a whole lot of people, maybe a couple of hundred, over there by the break, all very busy about something. I slowed as they weren't. I something apostrophe load. I slowed as they weren't up to no good, and I went across to see what it was. Well, they were so absorbed like, with their heads in a block, as you might say, that not one of them sees me coming. A prize fight, I says to myself. But as soon as I got near to hear the din, I knowed well enough 'twas a dog fight, and a regular red hot 'un. You'd have thought that all this brimstone demons had been out somewhere by that. You'd have thought as all the brimstone demons had been let out, somewhere by the sound of out. Such a snarling and a snapping and a bellowing as you've never heard. Well, just as I was nigh up, one of the chaps turned round and saw me, and then they all looked. I goes straight up and sings out, "Stop this, please, gentlemen, and I must take all your names and addresses for breaking the law." Of course, I knowed it was no good. I says it just for my own sake, 'cause I knows what would happen. Most of them laughed and crowded around the fight again. But one of the gentlemen, he came over to me with half a dozen more, and says he, "Constable, I say, you made a desperate resistance, but we can't have... Constable, I'll say you made a desperate resistance, but can't we have our little bit of pleasure interfered with? Oh, but we can't. I'm so sorry. But we can't have our bit of pleasure interfered with. There's thousands on it, so you must give in." With that, they had me tight in a moment, and soon stowed me away snug in the brake. When the fight was done, the gentleman, he come to me again. "The dogs is both dead, worse luck," he says. "And now, constable, we're all going home respectable like to tea." The dogs... Oh, I've read that. "You'll greatly oblige me by stopping here a bit and never taking your eyes off this cold chicken and champagne and these here couple of sovereigns, whilst I and me friends takes a little walk over the top." Lord, it was a game, I can tell ye. But the champagne was real good. "What did you do about it afterwards?" I asked him, for he had lapsed into amused silence. "Well, I should have eaten the chicken, pocketed the money, and never said a word about it to anyone." "Aye. Oh, I beg your pardon. I've ruined the end of that. Oh, so sorry. What did you do about it afterwards?" I said, for he had lapsed into an amused silence. "What would you have done?" he said, cautiously. "Well, I would have eaten the chicken, pocketed the money, and never said a word about it to anyone." "Aye, and that's just what I did. Sport, anyhow. And now there never was a policeman that wasn't a bit of a human being under his blue." I'm so sorry, I completely cocked that up, but there we are. That's chapter... We're chapter 13. We're on chapter 14 now. How are we doing? We're at past. We will commence again. Let me just see. You've been typing away. So, yeah, a bit of bribery and corruption there. Edward Moulding, hello to you. Would this be the bridge on Church Street? It could be. Do we need to go and have a look? What town was this? Let's have a look. I can't remember. Oh, Amesbury. Amesbury. Let's have a look, see if we can find Amesbury Bridge. Amesbury Bridge. Amesbury Bridge Club. That's not quite what I'm searching for. Images. Here we go. Is it Queensbury Bridge? Is that the one we're talking about? Queensbury Bridge? It looks... Hang on. Let's share the love. Queensbury Bridge. Queensbury Bridge, Amesbury. Looks a nice bridge. That does look a nice bridge to be sat on there. This bridge was built in 1775 by the 3rd Duke of Queensbury, who at the time was Lord of the Manor. Yeah, that'll be the one. That'll be the one. Excuse me. Actually born and bred in Wiltshire. Thanks, Linda, for the photos. Church Street. My brain got lost years ago. Power back on, says Mark Donny MacLeod. Did you have power lost? We've seen your photos, says Audrey Forbes. Oh, yes, we did like the photos. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Charlie Cooper. First time commenting on the live book reading. I really like listening to Richard. Makes me feel relaxed and chilled. Thank you very much, Charlie. Sorry, I've left the bridge on the thing. Yeah, sometimes some of the dialogue is difficult to read when it's all been... it's all apostrophed, where, you know, to try and recapture the dialogue. And when reading it for the very first time, I'm often very flustered by it. I've tuned into The Archers, says Graham Cass. Yes, it's a bit like that. I'll put its beak on back. Not quite sure what you mean about that. Oh, backwards. The birds... Oh, okay, yeah, that's the business about... My grandmother used to help collect flints on the field of her uncle's farm near Tonbridge. That was in the 1890s. Too many flints hilded sowing and ploughing. Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's just funny when you read it and you can just, you know, when you read something you can just sort of glance by and go, oh yeah. Or you can stop and you can think, oh, that was actually a job. People actually did do that. They did, you know, because you sometimes see the flints over by the hedges when you walk. And some time ago, years and years ago, as you say, you know, somebody took them off the ground. And I'm guessing with the ploughing, continually they're just coming to the surface. That was your bridge too far then, Richard. Yes, it was. And the allotment channel with Sean James Cameron is here. Hello, Sean. So, yeah, so that could well be the bridge. Brilliant. Okay. Chapter 14. I came at length into Porton, at the foot of a long, well-wooded hill. It was a mild, vacuous place, dominated by a railway station, and had the air of being little more than a siding on the great iron road of life itself. I should have passed through it without a stoppage, but catching sight of a little tea-house, I changed my mind and went in. 2 tranquil old ladies were sitting before the fire in the common room. Tranquil. I love that. 2 tranquil old ladies. Oh, look at those 2 tranquil old ladies. Aren't they tranquil? What a lovely way of putting it. They looked round as the doorbell jingled on my entry and regarded me with mild astonishment. At last it seemed to occur to one of them that a customer had arrived. She put away her needlework with a sigh and came towards me. The mention of tea called up in her a patient, almost... The mention of tea called up in her a patient, almost reproachful look. She considered the matter for a moment, but in the end resigned herself to the inevitable and motioned me to a seat. I had hardly been served, and the old ladies settled down to their needlework again, when the door burst violently open, the bell went into paroxysms of excitement, and a stout, square man came in like the gale of the wind. He was fair, sun-browned, had an eye like a bit of blue steel, and a voice like a whip-crack. He threw a traveller's sample case down on the table and looked about him, smiling peremptorily, as though he had caught us all in the breach of the peace. "What sort of tea do you give here?" The words rapped out, and their effect on the knitting party round the stove was instantaneous. If he had fired a gun into the chimney corner, it could hardly have caused greater commotion there. One old lady was bustling about him in a moment. The other frantically stirred the fire to hurry on the kettle. The cat got under the sofa. A little girl darted out of the back room and fell to spreading a tablecloth. The traveller stood in the midst of all, still smiling and wiping his forehead as though he were swabbing the deck of a ship. Presently his roving stiletto of an eye fell on the map I was studying. He plumped himself down in a chair at my side. "Touring, eh?" he said. "Good. We're in the same boat. You for pleasure, and I am for business. Tell me all about it. Where did you come from? Where are ye bound to now?" He squared his elbows on the table and knitted his brows over the map. It was all done with such breezy, easy goodwill and such a show of genuine interest as to preclude all possible offence. Going to Hampshire? Ah, I see. Stockbridge. No, Romsey then. What? No towns at all? Just through the villages? Well now, I'll tell you what to do." He rattled on through a long itinerary, eating and talking and following the suggested route with 2 forefingers at once. His sharp, short phrases went off in my ears like quick revolver fire. Indeed, his whole manner was nothing but a succession of explosions. Everything he said and did was at the same high pressure. He seemed to have no half moods. He must just go off with the same loud report, whether it was to kill an elephant or a gnat. Even when the little girl brought out a missionary box and stood smiling before us, the same quality manifested itself. My own penny sidled diffidently into the slot and reached the bottom with the merest clink. But his penny fell with the clank of a Roman discus. "Ah, God bless the work," he cried in a voice that detached flakes of whitewash from the ceiling. "Keep it going, my dear. 'Twill all be written up for you in the great ledger above." He patted the child's head, nearly braining her in his enthusiasm, and flung back into his seat. But he was up again next moment. "Up! There's my train coming. Good day all. Glad to have met you, sir. Out of my way, pussy." And he was gone as precipitately as he came. My goodness, what a whirlwind. When the doorbell had got over its second bad attack of Kentish fire, and the old ladies were comfortably settled to their knitting again, I ventured to take my own modest departure. The weather had again cleared. It was nigh sunset, and the sky was suffused with a beautiful rose-red light. There was a tingle in the keen air, but the north-west wind was dropping fast. In the highest treetops it still held forth plaintively, but below there had fallen a dead calm. I went on through the village until I came to a signpost at a junction of several roads, and then pulled up indecisively. Drawing out my knife, I threw it into the air. It came down with the blade pointing to the right. For half an hour, perhaps, the lane led me onward, I neither knowing nor greatly caring whither I went, for as much of it as I could see in the gathering darkness, the country seemed pretty undulating farmland with fine trees and well-grown hedgerows. But I had fallen upon an introspective browsing mood, and went along taking little note of outside things. At last, when the night had completely shut down and the moon was riding high in the clear, calm heaven, I came out upon a hilltop whence the road wound down over fairly open country, and here my wandering gait was arrested by an unusual spectacle. At half a dozen widely separate points in the greenish-grey obscurity below me, fires were kindling. There was one at the foot of the hill quite close. I see the long red tongues of flame shooting up amidst the trees, and as I looked, another and another fire broke out at various distances, while the lurid streak of a rocket sped up among the stars in the horizon and established a momentary rival there in red and blue and green. And now I remembered, though all day I had not given it a thought, it was the 5th of November. I mended my pace and soon reached the village at the bottom of the hill. The bonfire here proved to be a mammoth affair. It had been built on a clear space within a ring of cottages, and the shadows of the spectators on the house fronts looked like a war dance of giants. I wondered now that I'd heard no sound of the revelry long before I'd seen the fires. All the available population for miles must have been there, so dense was the throng of people, and obviously all had come with the full intention of enjoying themselves. A madcap spirit of frolic pervaded the entire crowd. Young and old had their pockets stuffed out with fireworks, and squibs and crackers hurled continuously through the air. The guy on his pole in the midst of the fire was a target for every kind and colour of pyrotechnic missile. One man had a huge bundle of shavings on a pitchfork, and holding it blazing aloft, was rushing about through the crowd at the head of a wild game of follow my leader. Boys and men were shouting, dogs barking, women and girls screaming to their delightful heart's content. Sparks flew about everywhere amid an atmosphere of descending soot. On my first appearance, I had to stop with my bare hands a flaming blue bullet from a Roman candle, which was instantly levelled at me, and the next moment I was ducking under a steady downpour of golden rain. I stood my ground for a while, but being unprovided with ammunition and therefore at a disadvantage in the game, I presently withdrew to the shelter of a wall a little way off, where I was able to look on comparatively unmolested. It was a fascinating sight, a perfect bit of unspoiled rural England. After that night, I am inclined to rank Guy Fawkes with Father Christmas, Santa Claus and Jack in the Green as a prime benefactor to the race, although all four merrymakers are rapidly passing through destitute into oblivion. But in the Wiltshire village, at any rate, there was no slackening of popular interest, at least as the matter of gunpowder treason. I stayed there, held by the flare and sparkle of the scene, the whirligig of the moving people, and listened to the babble of voices, the incessant reports, the crackling roar of the fire, until the end of the festivities, when it was well past 9 o'clock. Even then, when all the fireworks were spent, the fire burnt down to a hillock of glowing embers, and most of the people gone to their beds, I could not prevail on myself to go. I wandered about the empty green with its litter of firework cases, smoking a moralising pipe in the strange new silence, and in fancy reenacting the whole joyful business. It was only after I had taken several quiet turns in this way that I became conscious of someone else doing identically the same thing. I paused with my back to the fire and watched the strolling figure. It was that of a man in a tweed knickerbocker suit, much like my own. He had his hands deep in his breech pockets and a briar pipe in his mouth, as I had. He took ruminative strides, short and long alternatively, stopping to look about him at every half-dozen steps or so. With a laugh I realised that I'd been doing exactly the same thing a moment before. He drew nearer. I watched him still. Then, in the mingled sheen of the fire and moonlight, we came face to face and looked at each other, started back simultaneously. "Good heavens!" cried he. "I thought it was my own self." "Man alive," said I, at the same instant, "surely there isn't room in the world for two of us? Joking apart, though, you are ridiculously like me." "That's unfortunate," I replied, somewhat nettled. "Why ridiculously? You are no great beauty yourself, now I come to think of it." He laughed. We laughed together. After a little more talk, we resumed our interrupted perambulations, this time side by side. We were soon on cordial terms. "I fear," said he, "that you will get no accommodation this side of Salisbury, and that is miles away. But if you do not object to sleeping in a lonely old house, and can put up with myself as sole company, I can easily find you a bed." He made the offer with such frank kindness that I was more than happy to accept it, and together we turned our backs on the now slumbering village. We walked perhaps for half an hour, then took a woodland path, finally coming out to the open downs. Skirting a long belt of pines for some distance farther, at length we stopped in front of an old thatched house whose windows were all dark save one, whence came the flickering glow of a fire. The door stood partly open. My companion led the way in. "I live here quite alone, and have done so for many years past," he said, "so you must resign yourself to very primitive housecraft. Ah, here's the candle. Now, just get into this chair before the fire while I see if I can furbish up some supper." The room in which he left me was extraordinarily cosy. A great wood fire hissed and cracked in the wide old-fashioned grate. Everywhere the furniture and fittings gave evidence of good taste and ample means of gratifying it. The oak-panelled walls were hung with pictures, old china, here and there a fine piece of tapestry, some old pewterware bearing the Elizabethan E.R., innumerable odds and ends picked up, evidently, in many hands. But there was another aspect to the room which now riveted my curiosity. My new friend said that he had lived here alone, but no one with eyes in his head could stand in the room and not become at once aware of the unmistakably feminine influence which pervaded it. The vases of fresh flowers, the knick-knacks that only a woman could have contrived or even thought of, the sewing machine by the window, and the tambour frame with the embroidery unfinished upon it, were all silent indications of this influence, even if there had been nothing else. Upon the table lay a work-box, open and sprawling half its contents of cloth, as though the owner had just left it. A recess, whose curtain was partly drawn, showed outdoor apparel, obviously female, or feminine, and within the copper fender a pair of dainty slippers were warming, slippers with high French heels and spangled rosettes. He's obviously a transsexual. From my seat by the fire, all these things were inevitably visible to the most incurious eye. I could avoid seeing them no more than I could help certain speculations regarding them. But I had little time for this. My host returned, bringing one after another the materials of a substantial meal. These, however, he did not place on the large table. The meal was spread on a smaller table, much to our inconvenience, as there was not room upon it, and some of the things had to be consigned to the floor. Under the strong light of the lamp, which was his final requisition, the likeness that had at first seemed so remarkable between us weakened, I thought, considerably. He was an older man than I by perhaps 10 years, his face paler and prematurely lined. He proved a brilliant talker, but his sallies were interspersed with odd periods of silence, during which I could not get from him a word. He grew, however, more familiar and confidential as the meal progressed. Long after it was over, we sat by the fire, and these dumb periods of his, I was glad to note, became less frequent, finally disappearing altogether. Thence onward, until far into the small hours of the morning, he kept me enthralled by his talk. But it was not until we stood at the foot of the stairs together, bedroom candles in hand, that he gave me a clue to what, against all my resolutions, had persistently been kept uppermost in my mind. Instead of barring the house door, he left it ajar as we found it, and instead of extinguishing the lamp in the living room, he turned it low merely, and put more logs on the fire. Then he came and looked at me squarely, quietly, in the eyes. "Do you know what hope is?" he asked, after a silence. He was a keen beggar, that poet who said it. He was a keen beggar, that poet who said it springs eternal in human breasts. For I should know the truth of that after all these years. Hope and love, if there's been any quenching of them, I should have been dust and ashes long ago. He stopped. An odd sort of rattle sounded in his throat. The hard lines at the corners of his mouth deepened. He came closer to me, tremulously whispering. "It must seem strange to you, but every night I leave the room like that, just as it always used to be. And every night I leave the open door. So I have left them like that for years. So it may be for God knows how much longer, yet who can tell? Hope and love and full forgiveness waiting." He broke off suddenly, almost fiercely. "Ah, what a fool I am! Let's to bed." And when he says let's to bed, I don't think he means, bit of hanky-panky. So what do we take from that? He says here, and full forgiveness awaiting. So has a woman wronged him and fled, and he is waiting to take her back? Is that, I don't get the impression she's dead, but she's gone. But he says, "It must seem strange to you, but every night I leave the door like that, just as it always used to be. And every night I leave the door open. So I have left them for years. So it may be for God knows how much longer. Yet who can tell? Hope and love and full forgiveness waiting." So I reckon something happened. She must have wronged him in some way, perhaps with another fella or something, and he is willing to forgive her and he's waiting for her to return. That is the end of that chapter anyway, and that is chapter 14 done. We're on chapter 15 tomorrow. I hope you will join me. And sorry about the fluffs. I thumbed my thumb early, says Mike Stevens. Well, I'm very pleased to hear it. Charlie Cooper says 19 thumbs up. Oh, I see what you mean with thumbs. 22 thumbs out of 47 people. Thank you very much. He had an affair and she ran off. Why do you say he had an affair? Because he's the one saying full forgiveness awaiting. So he is awaiting to forgive her. Isn't that not right? My Open University starts this evening, so won't be around for the show. What are you doing at Open University, Mr. Sean? Thanks for thumbing up. Reckon she found the milkman. Ah, yes, she ran off with the milkman. Missed the last 8 minutes due to the business call, listening on Fast Forward. Always good to have a business call. Out of my way pussy, says. Oh, yes, out of my way pussy. Almost a line from James Bond. Pussy galore. It's turned into the Archers. My grandmother used to collect flints. Oh, yes, and blah, blah, blah. Great. Body dynamic gardening. Not body dynamic. I misread that. Biodynamic gardening. She walked out on him, says Edward Moulding. She walked out on him. Full forgiveness waiting from God when he passes over, I presume. Oh, right, okay. That's not how I read it, but that's interesting. People read these things differently, isn't it? And that's what it's all about. He doesn't tell us, and he leaves it up to us. Or a carry-on film. Oh, yeah. No, something mucking about. Matron. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you very much for coming along. All good fun. There's a Vogue show tonight, Tuesday. Doing them all this week. We'll see how they go this week, and if they're wanted, we'll continue next week. And another video walk for you tomorrow. and we will do more reading, of course. But thank you very much for your company. 50 people have joined, which is amazing for these live readings. Let's hope they grow and grow and more people come along and enjoy them. 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, the live reading, 4 o'clock every weekday, continuing with these beautifully written, eloquently written old books, and I do my best to try and read them. I fumble occasionally because I've not read it before. It's all sight reading, so sometimes a bit of fluffing going on, but we do our best. Anyway, thank you so much. It's been lovely. If you have enjoyed it, thumbs up would be great. Take care. See you tomorrow, and have a good one. Till then, from me, bye-bye. Bye-bye.